Good morning, grade 12. Welcome again. Today we are going to do our exam preparation for paper 2. Now, as you can remember, in June, I've done with you some of the stuff. Now we add just a few more. There you have it. On the 1st of October, we are going to write our second paper. It's a 150-mark question paper for 1.5 hours. Now, in the first 2 terms, it was easy. The first term's work was paper 1, second term's work was paper 2. Now it's a little bit different. You must please make sure that you consult with your guideline, your exam guideline again. In your exam guideline, you will see exactly what you have to study. We are going to do microeconomics and then contemporary issues. Now, the first that we have done in June also was your perfect market, your imperfect market, and your market failures. Now we are going to add also to paper 2, we are going to add inflation, tourism, and environmental sustainabilities. That's exactly what you have done now the last few months. Right. Now, the detail of your exam question paper will look like this. It is a 150-mark question paper. The duration is 1 hour and a half. There's 6 questions, and it is divided into 3 sections. You know that your first section is your short questions, which is compulsory. You have to do it. Section B consists of 3 questions between question 2 to 4, and there you must do 2 of them. So either 2 and 3 or 2 and 4 or 3 and 4. Make sure, please read your instructions very carefully. Then section C consists of 2 questions. This is your long question or your essay questions as we call them. This is question 5 and 6. But once again, people don't do both of them. Only one of them is necessary. Okay. You must not write both questions there. And it is very important, please write each question on a new page. It's just so much easier for the marker to see exactly where you are. And please draw lines underneath your headings, leave spaces open, make it the layout of your question paper tidy and nice so that it is easier to mark. Right, as I said to you, the first one that we're going to do is the dynamic of the markets. And when we talk about the dynamic of the markets, we talk about the perfect market and the imperfect market. The first one that we're going to do is your perfect market. Now, this is the one that we have done so many times before. Perfect market is many buyers, many sellers. There is no barriers to enter. It's a homogeneous product, and buyers know the lowest prices, they have enough information, there's no government intervention, and they are price takers. Remember, they are price takers, and a perfect competitor is the one that we every day know. Right, there you have it. Can you remember that we have done the graphs? Because this is a price taker, there is the market that is establishing the price, and then the individual producer in the industry must take the price. Therefore, it have a horizontal demand curve. Right, there you have it. You have your price curve, your price axis, you have your horizontal axis there, which is quantity. You have your horizontal demand curve, which is also your average cost curve. And then remember, the steps that I told you, please make sure there are 2 cost curves and there are 2 revenue curves. Let's start with the cost curves. We have there your marginal cost and you have your average cost. Now, what is the second one that you must do? You have to supply the revenue curves. Right, this is your revenue curve, which is also your average revenue, which is your marginal revenue. Step number 3. If you can still remember from the past, that step number 3 is you must check where is marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. And this is exactly there, and please indicate it like that if they ask it. If you have to draw a question like this, a graph. Right, this is then, and there you will see, people, that your average cost is equal to your average revenue, and your marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. So here, the perfect market is making a normal profit. Right, this is then your perfect market. Your imperfect market, can you still remember? There's 4 of them. There's a monopoly, there's an oligopoly, and there is a monopolistic competitor. Now, the first one that we know is the old one that we have here is the monopoly. They are price makers, they are sole providers in the economy, and they are also the alone sellers, and there's no close substitute. And the one that we know, the most common one of the monopolies that we know in South Africa is Econ. Right. Now, what is the characteristics of a monopoly? As I just said to you, there's no competition, there's no close substitute. This is he's a price maker, so he can control the prices. There are barriers to enter, so it's entirely blocked. For example, technology, of patents, maybe new companies, etc., etc. And all the information is available to the seller. The product is not homogeneous, as I said to you. Be very careful, it is a unique product. And what is one of the negative things here is that it needs a lot of capital to start a monopoly. And there are also legal considerations. All right, here we have it. This is the graph, and remember that we have certain steps. Step number 1 is we must draw our curves. We first have our revenue curves. This is your average revenue, and that one is your marginal revenue. And then step number 2, we add our cost curves. There you have your marginal cost curve, and there you have your average cost curve. Wonderful. Now, what is important here is step number 3, we must check where is marginal cost equal to marginal revenue. What do we call that? Yes, maximum profit. Right, where is marginal cost equal to marginal revenue? There you have it. But this is not where you're going to draw your line. Now you go up to your average cost. In other words, this is what it's going to cost you to produce this product. And this is what the consumer is prepared to pay for the product. Are you with me? So this one here is your cost, and this one is the price. And what do you realize here? Yes, he is making, the monopolist is making a economic profit. Economic profit is the profit over and above the profit, the normal profit that you anyway makes. All right. Once again, remember your graph. Remember your average cost curve there. Remember that your marginal revenue curve is always, this is average revenue. Your marginal revenue is always under or below the average revenue curve. More or less in the middle of that axis there. Right. This is an easy 8-mark question, 8 marks that you can get mala. So please make sure that you can draw these graphs. Make sure that you take a pencil and a paper and sit and draw it for hours until you have it right. The second imperfect competitor that we have is, of the second imperfect market, is an oligopolist. Now, an oligopolist is a small number of relative large businesses like the oil industry, the cell phone industry, telecommunication industries, the banks, car industries, etc., etc. Right, now let's see there. What are the characteristics of an oligopolist? Limited competition. Remember I said there's a few suppliers, so there's limited competition. The interaction is between different companies, and they don't change their prices that much. They are going to look at each other before they are going to change their prices. They have a cost advantage. They have an absolute cost advantage over the rest of the competitors. And what is important here is that they make a joint decision. This is the key instrument. They come together and then they are deciding on prices and the production output. It is difficult to enter because new firms will experience high barriers to enter this. And there are high profits, and sometimes they are very high, abnormal profits. Right, interdependence. Another key characteristic of this is that they are looking at each other. They are depending largely on each other to respond, and then they will also respond. Then collusion. Grade 12s, please. They always ask in some of the exams, they ask what is collusion, different kinds of collusion. Make sure that you know it. I told you in June also, make sure that you know this. We have explicit collusion. This is illegal. This is where firms come together and they decide on prices. This is illegal in a country, and we are not allowing it in South Africa. There's the two forms of collusion. We have cartels and we have price leadership. Now cartels, the most common and well-known cartel, example of a cartel is the OPEC countries. What is OPEC? That is oil, petroleum, exporting countries, and remember that. And now what is a cartel? Cartels is collusion between oligopolists, where they openly and formally come together and they decide on the price and the output of one specific product. That is illegal in South Africa, so here you will get a fine when you are going to do that. The next one is price leadership. Now price leadership is because collusions are forbidden by law. Instead of coming together formally, openly, so that everybody can do that, they tend to do so tacitly. In other words, without any communication formally or without any formal agreement, they decide that they are going to follow the price leader. The price leader is normally the most dominant or the largest business in that specific industry. Okay, so remember a cartel and a price leader. Non-price competition. They've asked it in a June exam and you did not do good in this. Please, you must study this of the oligopolist as well as the monopolistic competitor. Study this, it's important. What is the non-price competition? They don't fight with prices, they are fighting in different ways by product differentiation, different kinds of products, that's more or less the same. Product proliferation is different ranges of products that cater for different markets. And then advertisements. Every evening when you are watching television, there's always advertisement of cell phone companies, of banks, of oil companies. Please check that and you will see, you will realize that this is how they are advertising themselves. Right. Our oligopolists have a kink demand curve. A kink demand curve is because one oligopolist, one competitor may perhaps decide to increase his price. For that moment, he is losing a lot of market shares because the others are not following. And he is then losing market shares. And then the others decide, but when he's going to decrease his price, then they will follow. For a while, then this is elastic. And when the others are following, when he is decreasing his price, then we get to a kink demand curve. Right. The next one that we have is the imperfect market. And the last one of the imperfect market is our monopolistic competitors. Yeah, I know it's nearly lunchtime, so after this you can go and have something that is advertised here on the screen. A monopolistic competitor is relatively many firms and buyers. Under monopolistic competitors, the number of the firms are more than a monopolist, where there's only one. More than an oligopoly, where there's only a few, but fewer than a perfect market. There you have examples of monopolistic competitors in South Africa or in the world. Right. What are the characteristics? Now, people, as I said to you before, you must remember that a monopolistic competitor have a little bit of the perfect market and a little bit of the imperfect market. Some of the characteristics you will realize is perfect market. Some of them is imperfect market. So they are a little bit of a mix between the monopolist and the perfect competitor. There's a large number of buyers and sellers. This is what you can see in the perfect competitor also. Sellers act as agents of products or as producers themselves. Now this one is different from the perfect competitor. Products are not all homogeneous. They are also differentiated. Differentiated mean they are different. All right. Entry into the market is free. That is for the perfect competitor. There are no barriers such as licenses and permits and stuff like that. Right. The next one is market information. Now, in a perfect competitor, a monopolistic competitor, the information for both the buyers and the sellers is incomplete. We don't have enough information about that. As the oligopolists, they are also fighting non-price competition. And there are different ways in which they are doing that. They have differentiated products. They also have the following. They are fighting in marketing campaigns. They are focusing on good health. For example, a breakfast cereal with reduced sugar, or they are focused on superiority, and they are also a different market. There you can see two different monopolistic competitors. The one is selling his product with one kind of cool drink. The other one is selling his product with another kind of cool drink. So this is how they differentiate from each other. Differentiation may be even imaginary, that you, for example, think that Coke or one kind of cool drink is a better kind of cool drink than another one. Products are differentiated, and then they are going like beauty products, where they try to promote the feel-good product. You've seen on television they have advertisements of certain moisturizers or stuff that they are putting on their faces, and then one day there are spots on, and then a few weeks later there are no spots. This is the kind of differentiation that they have. To summarize, if we look at the summary for our first part, that is our markets, in the long run, the monopolist is producing less output and higher prices than the perfect competitor. Right. There it is, just for a summary. We have our perfect competitor that is making economic profit. Can you see that? The average cost is lower than the average revenue. And this is the perfect competitor. And this is then your monopolist. Your monopolist is also making economic profit, but not just in the short run, also in the long run. Make sure that you can differentiate between the two different kinds of graphs. Right, the next one that we are doing is market failures. What is a market failure? A market failure occurs when markets fail to achieve technical efficiency or allocative efficiency. Can you remember we have done it in grade 10? This production possibility curve, this is showing us two possible production choices that we can produce, healthcare and cars. When you produce more of one, then you have to produce less of the other one, because your resources are fixed or scarce. You can also produce in this area here, but then you are not producing efficiently. Right, remember that you can draw this with market failures. What are the reasons for market failures? Public goods that's not properly delivered. Merit or demerit goods. You know what is demerit goods? Demerit goods is like alcohol and cigarettes and drugs and those kinds of things. Merit goods, education, healthcare. Then they have imperfect competition. Imperfect competition is a market failure if there's only one supplier of a product, because this one supplier is going to exploit the customers by asking very high prices. Imperfect information, many times you see in the media that they are advertising something and you don't know whether the information that you are getting of that specific product is right. Immobility of the factors of production. It tells you exactly what it is. Remember what's the factors of production? Labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and land. It is immobile. Land, for example, you cannot move. You can say, yes, ma'am, but they can move labor. They can move labor, but it is difficult for one person to move one day and another day they must start with another job at another place, because it is very difficult to leave your friends, your house, your family, everything behind. Externalities. Externalities is one of the market failures that is affecting all of us. Something like pollution. We also get positive externalities like education and healthcare and that kind of thing, but we also have external negative externalities, which are, for example, pollution, noise pollution, water pollution, etc., etc. And then a very important one, the imperfect distribution of income and wealth. That certain people have more than other people, and that some people don't even have access to the market. This is a market failure. Right, the first one that I said to you, there's the externality. The first externality, this is a negative externality. That is called a negative externality because it's pollution. What is an externality? That is when some of the costs and the benefits of a decision or action are borne or enjoyed by second or third parties. This company here, that is producing whatever they are producing there, they also have benefits by producing their products. They have costs, but they don't have the cost. The externality there is the third party, is that we must go through that specific area and there are pollution. So you must make sure that you know what is an externality. They also call it a spillover effect or a neighborhood effect. All right? Well, you remember that, spillover, ne? To understand externalities, you have to understand that there are certain costs. Private cost, which is your internal cost, that is what you pay. Private benefit, that is your internal benefit, that is what you receive from buying that good. Then social cost. Social cost has to do with the community, the society at large. This is the cost that we have to pay for going to a doctor if you inhale some of the smoke of a company that is producing and that is polluting the air. Then social benefits, that is positive externalities. This is like, for example, municipalities that is providing us with clean water and everybody is then healthy, and private cost plus external benefits are equal to your social cost. Study that. I told you in June also, but make sure that you understand this. Externalities are activities that exist because there's a difference between social cost and private cost. Please make sure that you understand this. There's a negative externality. A negative externality means that your supply curve is moving inwards. If your supply curve is moving inwards, and this is also the spillover effect, this is when, for example, if the company that is polluting the air or water or make a lot of noise have to pay for that specific product, this product is going to cost much more and they are going to produce less of that specific product. So negative externalities, if you have to draw the sketch, remember it is the supply curve that moving inwards. Right. Pollution is an example of negative externalities. Also, the air and noise. Also, accidents and damage to roads. This is, and the motor car that you are using. Right? That is negative externalities. Now, what is positive externalities? This occurs when a benefit is derived by a second party for the action or decision of another party. Now, here, the first one that we have here is your negative externality. This is the positive externality. When it's a positive externality, then there's a bigger demand for this product. And if there is a bigger demand, if we can work it out that way, then the price is going to increase and our quantity is also going to increase. What is examples of positive externalities? If you go to school, if you have education, if you have a beautiful environment, which we will come to later on, when you have healthcare that is very good for the society. Now, market failures occur also when there are not enough technical or productive and allocative efficiency. You have done it in grade 10, you do it again in grade 12, so make sure that you do know this. They ask it in June exam, can you remember that? What is productive efficiency? In terms of cost, it means that the business does not, that's inefficiency, produce goods at the lowest possible cost. In other words, there's room for reducing the cost. What is allocative efficiency? That is when the product mix does not reflect the consumer's taste. In other words, there is a demand for summer clothes now because it's towards the end of the winter, and then it's not available. Then it is allocative inefficient. What is Pareto efficiency? Some other time they're going to ask you this. So learn it, make sure that you understand. It refers to the situation where you cannot allocate more, otherwise you are going to make one person worse off than making the other one better off. This is important. If there's not enough textbooks in your class and your teacher take one textbook and give it to another person, this person is most making you now worse off and somebody else better off. Now that is Pareto inefficiency. Okay, so make sure that you understand the difference there. You have done it in grade 10, so it is possible that you will remember that again. Can you still remember? This is the next one. Public goods, what is the definition? This is also called collective or social goods. This is what the community goods is different, defense, police services, street lights, floods, something like that. Collective goods is something that you are going to pay for. Parks, beaches, street, public transport. And public goods have two features. One is non-rivalry, the other one is non-excludable. Non-rivalry means that you cannot say that one person cannot enjoy it and then another person can enjoy it. So this means that when one person enjoy it, it doesn't mean that it reduces the enjoyment of another person. Non-excludability is then when you say people are not willing to pay for goods, then you cannot say to them, you cannot use that. We call them free riders. Free riders, it's a problem as public goods because people can enjoy the benefit of public goods without paying for them. Okay. The next market failure is merit and demerit goods. What is merit goods? I just said to you, it's beneficial goods to the society, and this is, for example, something like education and healthcare. What is demerit goods? It's like drugs and those kind of things which is harmful for the community. This is a negative externality. That is cigarettes, alcohol, etc., etc. Government can ban demerit goods by reducing consumption by means of taxation. Can you remember that every year when they have the budget speech, then they increase sin tax? Now that is the kind of thing that the government is doing to ask us not to use these things. The next one, as I said to you, is imperfect competition. In market economy, the market is often there is only one specific market in one specific area, and this can then exploit the people, the customers, because they can raise their prices. A lack of information, for example, medicine. It may be that you receive certain information about a product, or they say you must drink this kind of medicine or something else, and then the information that you have about that is not totally right. Or you buy a second-hand car. Nobody told you that that car was in an accident before or something like this. Right. Immobility of the factors of production, as I just said to you, it is difficult to change that, and it is difficult to adjust rapidly in supply. The supply will meet demand, but not immediately. It is difficult to change from one job to another, and it's the same with physical capital. The next one that we have there is imperfect distribution of income and wealth. Free market trend to generate an unequal distribution. So if you have a business, then you are going to have more money than somebody else. So this is what is happening in a free market. And this is caused by a number of factors. Difference in market power, the initial distribution of wealth, unequal access to markets and education opportunities, and then discrimination like we had in the past. So grade 12, this is then your market failures. Let's quickly go through them again so that we have know what is going on. Reasons for market failures, remember them. The first one is public goods, merit and demerit goods, imperfect competition, imperfect information, immobility of the factors of production, externalities, and the last one is imperfect distribution of income and wealth. Right. This was then the first term's work. So up till here, you know exactly what is going on. This is now, no, this was the second term's work. This is what we have done in the last few weeks. We're going to do now inflation. This is the new one. You're also going to do tourism, and then we're going to do environmental sustainability. Not one of these things are new to you. You have done inflation throughout grade 10 and 11. You have done tourism in grade 11, and you also have done environmental sustainability all over. So this is important that when you answer questions here, make sure that you have the new up-to-date information. Inflation. It's a disease if we talk about economics. Inflation can be a very bad thing. What is inflation? It's a general and sustained rise in the price level of goods and services for a given period. I know your books say it's a general increase in, it's a continuous increase in the general price level of goods and services over a specific period of time. Study that. You know that. Now, what are the characteristics? It's a continuous process. It happens all the time. Prices are increasing and increasing. It referred to a rise in prices. It involved considerable increase in prices, and it caused, and this is important, it declined the purchasing power of money. If I give you 100 Rand now, and I say you can go and buy something with it, and you must write on a piece of paper what you have bought now, and in a year's time, I'm going to give you 100 Rand again. And then I say, bring me that paper, so that I say, go and buy the same thing. Then you will realize that you cannot buy the same thing because of the purchasing power of that 100 Rand. 100 Rand will not be the same value next year than now. Right. How do you measure the inflation rate? We look at the prices of a representative selection of goods and services that a household buy. You remember they talk about the basket. Now, this is when we have the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index is where they add up all the prices of this specific product, basket, and then in 2 months, they are adding up the prices of the basket again. And then they can see whether there was an increase or a decrease in the general price over a specific period of time. Right. How do you calculate inflation? Make sure that you know the calculations. They will perhaps ask you this. You take this year's CPI. You subtract last year's CPI. You multiply it by 100% because we want a rate. If somebody asks you a rate, you must remember that is also always a percentage. And then you divide it by the CPI of last year. Grade 12s? If you want to see if you gain weight, what are you doing? You take your weight of last year, you take your weight of this year, you subtract it from each other, and then you will see, right, I've gained weight or I lost weight. And then, if you want to see if it's a percentage, you multiply it with 100% there so that we can work out our calculation. So what are we looking at? We look at the CPI of last year or the previous year and the CPI of the next year. And then multiply by 100, divide by the CPI of the previous year. All right? Is julle reg? Okay. Right, the next one, the types of inflation. We have a lot of inflation. What is consumer inflation? It's a continuous increase in the general price level of goods and services that households pay in an economy over a period of time. We have headline inflation. We have core inflation. We have administered prices. We have production inflation. We have all-inclusive inflation. We have hyperinflation, stagflation, and deflation. Right, let's see what it is. Headline index or headline inflation is consumer inflation based on unadjusted CPI inflation. In other words, it is the CPI inflation. They call it CPI inflation. This has not been adjusted for price increases. Next one, what is your core inflation? This is inflation based on the adjusted CPI inflation rate. In other words, they have adjusted it for price changes, where volatile elements such as food has been removed. Administered prices, you must always remember, when you hear the word administered prices, then you must know it is done by the government, where the government is administer certain prices. Inflation of those goods and services that have their prices controlled by the government. For example, water and refuse removal, petrol and those kind of things. All right. Produces inflation. This is a continuous increase. Kyk mooi, what's the difference? In the general price level of the input that businesses, not consumers, must pay for the production process. And this is measured by your PPI. What is PPI? Producers Price Index. This is only for the producer. All-inclusive inflation, inflation calculated for the economy as a whole, and this is based on the GDP deflator. Right, another few of them. What is hyperinflation? It's runaway inflation. When prices rise by 1,000,000% per year or more. That recently happened in 2007 to Zimbabwe. So this is runaway inflation. What is stagflation? Tell you more, that it is stagnating. It is an economic situation where the economy is in stagnation. In other words, there's little or no growth. And the inflation occurred at the same time. This is a very dangerous situation in a country when we have stagflation. What is deflation? It's just the reverse of inflation. It is a sustained decline in the general price level of goods and services over a specific period of time. Right, will you remember them? Headline inflation, core inflation, administered inflation, producers inflation, and all-inclusive inflation. Hyperinflation, stagflation, and deflation. Right. Now, what causes inflation? There are two causes: demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. Demand pull inflation is demand for goods and services increase, and then at the same time, the products does not increase at the same rate. In other words, too much money chasing too few goods. This is a pull-up situation. Greater spending by the household, there's bigger, more credit available, there's more investment in a country, there's higher earnings from exports, and there's a decline in savings. They say our country is the country with the lowest percentage of savings in the world. Now, let's see if we can make a difference. Cost push inflation, people, this is when they push up the prices of certain products when they are producing them. It is affected by too much wages. You see recently that people were striking for higher wages. Now, they can have higher wages, but then their productivity must also increase. If the productivity does not increase, this one, decrease in productivity for the same remuneration, then you are causing inflation. An increase in the key imported inputs, like for example, say the petrol price or the oil price is increasing, then it's going to increase the product. Exchange rate depreciation, if our exchange rate is weaker against other currencies, then we have a problem. An increase in the profit margins, this is where the businesses decide they are going to increase their profits. And natural disasters, it's more always then there's a shortage of products. Okay, what is the consequences? There's certain consequences. The purchasing power of money is decreasing. I told you just now. If you pay now, if you go by taxi or you go by car, you pay now more for the same amount of petrol than a year ago. Income and wealth distribution. And then you have here creditors suffer because the value of the money decrease. You must study these things. They ask the consequences. The salaries and wage earners suffer because their salary stays the same, but the prices of products is increasing. And investors, they have fixed assets and their value is decreasing. Entrepreneurs benefit because they can increase profit margins more than cost. Savings will decrease as the value of money is dropping. And then South Africa have a progressive tax system. That result that higher income earners is paying more tax than lower income earners. And then this can affect also your economic growth negatively, and it can have that other countries don't have confidence in our country if our inflation rate is too high. How do you fight it? How do you combat it? You have different ways in which we can do it. We can do it from the fiscal measures, we have monetary measures, and then we have general measures. Now, the first fiscal measure that we have, increase the tax rate. Increase the indirect tax rate. Reduce your government spending. Reduce the measures to increase productivity, tax rebates, or introduce that. Now, can you remember what is the fiscal policy? The fiscal policy is taxing and spending. In other words, taxing, getting in tax, and spending is the spending of the government. There you can see there's a little scissor, and they are going to cut government spending. Now, the fiscal policy makes use of tax increases and spending cuts to combat inflation. Monetary has to do with the Reserve Bank and the supply of money. What can they do? They increase the interest rate of banks, the repo rate, ne? And then this decrease the money supply, this decrease the availability of credit from banks, and the decrease in currency control. What is the monetary policy? Involve reducing money supply to combat inflation. You must remember these things, ne? General measures, increase productivity, produce more. Freeze prices and wages, that they don't have more wages and the prices is not going up. Implement a wage restraint policy that the wages is going to stay lower, the wage increases is going to stay lower than the inflation rate. Encourage people to save. Control the measures of consumer credit at the banks. Make competing import goods cheaper. Introduce price indexes like prices for particulars like the CPI, etc., etc. And then, which we have got a lot of successful in South Africa, is your inflation target. Our inflation target is between 3% and 6%, and the government is keeping it there by introducing these different kinds of measures. Right, now this was then your inflation. The next one that you have done is tourism. It's very nice to do this. Tourism is the activity of people that travel and stay in certain places outside their usual environment for not more than 1 year at a specific place. They may perhaps go there for business, they may go there for leisure or to study, but they must not get a remuneration. That is tourism. Tourism is very big in South Africa. Tourism is one of the biggest contributors to GDP in our country, so it is important that we should take care of our tourism industry. There's different types of tourism. Tourists traveling for leisure and recreation, tourists traveling for businesses, to do business, and then tourists that are traveling for purposes of studying or go for medical treatment if it's not available in their specific country. Okay, why is tourism growing all over the world and domestically? Because of the increase in leisure time. People have now more time. They have more disposable income. In other words, they have more money to spend on something like a vacation or holiday. There's an increase in car ownership. More people have access to their own transport. An improvement in accommodation facilities all over the country. And there's an increase in the marketing of tourism in a specific country. Now, another reasons, internationally, there's development for aircrafts. There is establishment of low-cost airlines. There's development of packages for holidays, new technology for making bookings easier, and there's more efficient process of getting your foreign exchange. What is the effects of tourism? It has an effect on the economy. It has an effect on the ecology and on the social culture. The economy, it creates jobs. It has economic growth. We receive foreign currency, development of your infrastructure. It has a multiplying effect. One person's expense is another person's income, and it stimulates trades like agriculture and mining. It has an impact on the fauna and flora of our environment. It needs to impact certain studies and certain preservation and conservation. This is important. It has an impact on our social culture, where we have indigenous knowledge, where we have cross-cultural relationships, where we build nation pride and international peace and those kinds of things. This is the effect that tourism have on a country. Now, who's benefiting from tourism? The household, the business, the government, and the infrastructure. Those are the participants of the economy. Can you remember that? Households receive salaries from income by jobs. Businesses receive big income because they have travel agents, hotels, accommodation, restaurants, attraction sector. This is important. Then the government is receiving tax. They receive the infrastructure. They receive money so that infrastructure can be upgraded. They raise revenue, not just from tax, but overall on tax on airport tickets, air travel, taxes on hotel rooms, etc. So the government is also getting money from tourism. Infrastructure, remember the infrastructure, if we do it for international tourists, then we also gain from that specific infrastructure that's better. Better roads, better communication, better electricity, those kinds of things, beaches that's clean, lakes and rivers, and we have access to better ambulance services, medical service, and information services. Now, what is South Africa's profile? Most people come from African countries and Europe, and domestically, people go for leisure. The main reason is for holidays and for leisure time. Indigenous knowledge system, this is a set of cultural information and traditional skills that has developed around a specific community, like building and construction, arts and craft, medicine and welfare, food and drinks. Right. Now the attraction is that people use the indigenous knowledge. We also have World Heritage Sites in South Africa, like Robben Island, Isimangaliso wetlands. We have the Table Mountain and those areas, the Drakensberg, the Mapungwe areas. Now, and we also have art festivals and cultural village like the Basotho Cultural Village in Kwatwa. Okay, the Department of Tourism have policies to improve tourism in South Africa by improving marketing through the 4 Ps, product, price, promotion and place, improve marketing of tourism products, the development of tourism products, improve the quality of services by training people, make sure that there is enough security so that it doesn't have a negative effect on us, improve the transport infrastructure, and promote ownership of our businesses. We attract these people to our country, and we try to have the latest communication systems and promote film and television industries. Now that was then tourism. The last one is environmental sustainability. Our time is very short now. The state of the environment is very important for environmental sustainability. Environmental sustainability means that we must keep our environment as we received it. The environment is under big pressure. Do you see there somebody is rinsing out the earth? We are using up the earth at a higher rate than what the earth can provide us with. And why is that? Excessive consumption, an increase in population, and then the big culprit, pollution. We have different kinds of pollution. What is pollution? The addition of something with a detrimental effect to the ecosystem, or pollution occur when the flow of residual emissions result from human activities exceeding natural environment capacity and they absorb them. They use them up. We use the earth up. Types of pollution, we have water pollution, air pollution, sound pollution, and land pollution. Go and study that. Conservation, the sustainable use and management of our natural resources. And we must start with our renewable and non-renewable resources to conserve them. Preservation, that's preserving the general environment and keeping the habitable as possible, keep it like it is, like people and animals. Heritage goods are usually preserved. And then we must look at our biodiversity of a country. Biodiversity is different species in one specific area. And we must make sure that we are looking at them very, very carefully, that we can preserve and conserve them for our future people in this country. Now, the Department of Education and Trade hosts a national biodiversity workshop in 2004, where they have made sure that everybody that attend the workshop can be educated about how to conserve our environment. What is environmental sustainability? It's the availability of the environment to survive its use for economic activities. And how do you measure it? By the market. Sustainability is achieved only to the extent that resource prices rise as they become scarce. And then public sector intervention. What can the government do? The government must intervene. They must give somebody granting property rights. If you grant somebody a property right and something belongs to you, then the government makes sure that if it's belonging to you, you will take care of that specific area because it's most your property then. Charging for the use of the environment. If you use the environment, you're going to pay environmental tax on that, and you're going to pay green tax. Common and control policies. This is to regulate the levels of pollution. International measures. They achieve meaningful and broad-based and global approach to have measures that can prevent this kind of thing. And the one side, it looks nice. On the other side, there is environment or pollution or something. The issues that they are concerned about, the world, sustaining biodiversity, chemical waste, hazardous waste, climate changing policies, and the loss in indigenous knowledge. What are the international agreements? There are certain national agreements. In 1992, they start in Rio de Janeiro with the environmental sustainability agreements. They have in 1992 the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. In 1996, they had the Habit 2 conference in Istanbul. And then they had the Kyoto Protocol on climate change, earth warming. In 2002, they had the Johannesburg Summit on Sustainable Development. And they were not just talking about our environment. They were talking about poverty, access to clean water, and that kind of thing. Then they had in Durban in 2011, recently, COP 1, 2, 3 up till 17 of the United Nations. It was a conference on climate change. And then recently in Rio de Janeiro, they had a conference on sustainable development with the theme, the future we want. The future we want to take care of our environment. We want to take care of our globe. And we as a nation, we as the world, must build the future that we want. Okay, grade 12s. I hope you have a wonderful exam. This is a very important exam. This is where you are going to be tested whether you know what's going on or not. Study hard. Forget now about the matric farewell and all those things. Love economics and study every day. Good luck for the examination. I'll see you with the spring school again. Bye.